What's going on, guys? It's your boy Tacho here, and we are back for some more Fire Emblem Heroes. And today we are going to do something that I've been actually wanting to do for a while now, but we are going to be taking a look at the GamePress tier list for Fire Emblem Heroes. Now, this has got to be like one of the most hotly debated tier lists in the entire community right now. So I thought I would just take a look at it myself and weigh in, give my 2 cents on this tier list. So they make it very clear that this is an offense tier list. They have offense list criteria and all of these things right here. Now, just to save some time, I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's all right here, and there will, of course, be a link to this tier list for you to check out for yourself, where you can read the criteria and so on. But it does, like, to me, just at a glance, it did seem like a very generalized tier list. So let's just quickly open it up. And this tier list also covers literally every single unit in the game. So, I mean, it's a great undertaking to have to do that many units on one tier list. I have to give them my utmost credit for that, because I definitely don't have the patience to actually rank the entire game on a single tier list. So don't be too hard on GamePress. This is a lot of work, you gotta understand, and this is just not an easy thing to do. So just complete shoutouts to GamePress for this. Now, I also did take a look at the Japanese tier list earlier, if you guys saw that video, and that Japanese tier list cut a lot of corners. So they only had like a top 5 units in the game, and then they segued into what they thought was the next best, and then they use a scoring-based cutoff system as opposed to like actual numbered or lettered rankings. Like here we have tier 1, which would be the equivalent of an S tier, and tier 2 would be like A tier, and then tier 3 is B tier, and so on and so forth. So to save some time and just cut a few corners myself, I'm only going to be talking about their tier 1 and maybe a little bit into tier 2, because otherwise we would be here all day, and I don't have the patience to actually cover the entire list. So we're only looking at tier 1, and I'm going to give my opinions on whether the tier 1 is solid or whether they need to add something in or bump something down and so on. So hope you guys are going to enjoy me for this journey that we are about to embark on. So let's just get started on the far left-hand corner with the sword units. Also, this tier list is up to date as of 5/15/2020, which was basically last month at this point. So we have had a couple of units added to the game that are not on this tier list yet, such as Mila and also Mirabilis and Sayri and so on. So that's not the biggest deal right now. I mean, I don't think any of those units in particular would end up in a tier 1 anyway, except maybe Mila, but I mean, that's a little debatable, so let's not get into that for now. Okay, so let's start things off by taking a look at who they have in tier 1 for sword units. Okay, we have Altina leading the pack all the way in front. So, okay, it looks like just from Altina and then Byleth's being like this is in ABC order as opposed to being in, like, an order from best to worst. So don't take it too personally if you see Altina ahead of Shannon. That doesn't mean he's the worst and she's the best. It's just ABC order. Okay, so we have Altina, we got the 2 Byleths, we have Kid Kada, we got Halloween Hector, Legendary Eliwood, Fallen Ike, we got Lakche, we got Inigo, we got Marita, and we have Shannon. Okay, so honestly a very solid selection of units there for tier 1. I have literally no complaints with anyone except for a pretty glaring thing here. I mean, one of these guys is absolutely not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. So I'm not gonna lie, Inigo, as good as he is, he got a refine, and he got an awesome refine at that. There's no way in the world this man is tier 1. I don't care what the argument is, he is not that good. He's good, he's just not that good, right? So let's not have this guy in tier 1. Let's bump him down to tier 2, and oh wow, we have Resplendent Eliwood in tier 2 while Inigo is in tier 1. Are you serious? Okay, so just switch places with these two and it's perfectly fine by me. I don't really think there's anything in here that I would particularly bump into Tier 1 just based on the quality of the units in Tier 1. These guys really do just stand apart from the rest of the pack. So just swap Inigo with Resplendent Eliwood, and I think we're good to go. Now, the thing about Inigo is that he's another one of these Vantage Brave attacking units, like Keaton and Sword Reinhardt and Altina and so on. And he's probably the worst out of all of them, because he doesn't have anything unique to throw in his favor. He does have a 16 might weapon, which is the only one that does the Brave attack like that on both phases, so he does have a little bit of an edge there in terms of might. But, I mean, you look at Altina, and she has Twin Blades, which eats through damage reduction, so you can't punk Altina with Repel or Close Call or Irvon or anything like that. So, Altina's just way better. Also, she's an Astro-type hero, so you can score higher by having her. Also, Altina can fly, which I think that's already just too much for any of these other Vantage units to really compete with. Flying type mobility is so insane on Altina. Also, Keaton, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that Inigo is better than Keaton, who they, interestingly enough, also have in Tier 1. We're going to cover that in a second, but I don't know, like, compared to Altina, Inigo is not even in the same realm as her, so I would probably just bump him down and put Resplendent Eliwood in there. Alright, let's move on to the Red Tome mages now. Okay, we have Fallen Julia, we got Dancing Micaiah, and we have Darja in Tier 1. Pretty solid start, honestly. Fallen Julia is like one of the best units in the game, bar none. She is so ridiculous, and she's even tanky too, so it's hard for you to kill her if you're trying to get the finish. Like, just offensively and defensively, she's a nightmare. She is just way too good. Now, I feel like Dancing Micaiah, you could probably bump down one tier. She's really good, to be sure, and she does have built-in Hardy Bearing. So, Dancing Micaiah does have a lot of tricks up her sleeve, actually, but, I mean, in comparison to Fallen Julia, it's not even close. Like, Dancing Micaiah could probably be bumped down. And then Darja, interesting that Darja is in Tier 1. She is a free-to-play merge project, so that's actually very good that she made it up here. And I don't really have a complaint about this. Her weapon got a really good refine, and she has the supporting style options where she can debuff foes in 2 spaces, coupled with a Blade Tome, of course, so Darja is still really solid. Okay, and down here, is there anyone that should be bumped up? Just off the top of my head, Kyria and Lysithea just stick out like sore thumbs. Where do they have Ophelia, actually? Okay, so they have Ophelia in Tier 1 as well. And to be honest, Lysithea is literally just a better Ophelia once they both have special attacks ready. Now, of course, the only thing is that Ophelia gets to her special a lot easier than Lysithea, but, I mean, that's a moot point if you're going to run them both in Aether Raids, because Lysithea can just have Infantry Pulse allies around her to help her get there. And once they both have special attacks, like, Lysithea gains plus 10 attack and plus 4 speed when she initiates, whereas Ophelia doesn't gain anything besides the -1 cooldown, which Lysithea already has. So, also, Lysithea is a red type of mage, which gives her color advantage on Brave Ike, who is currently the most popular bait unit in Aether Raids. So that's another thing to hold over Lysithea for Ophelia. So yeah, I would, at the very least, Lysithea needs to be in Tier 1. And Kyria, I would make arguments. If you're going to have Darja in Tier 1, then I would say Kyria should be up there too. The only real advantage Darja has is that she has a Blade Tome, and she probably has a better damage ceiling than Kyria has, but, like, if we're looking at the overall entire picture, Kyria has defenses, and Kyria can debuff a little bit higher with the -6 attack and -6 res. So I think Kyria is a little more overall good than Darja, even though Darja is very good herself. But, I mean, I'm not saying bump Darja down, I'm just saying bump Kyria up. So, pretty much just have Kyria and Lysithea in Tier 1, and I would be perfectly fine with that afterwards. Alright, so next up we have the Beasts and the Dragon types for Red. So we have both of the Iduns, we have Keaton and Tibarn. Alright, really, there's no complaints with me from this. Now, on the Japanese tier list, they have Tibarn listed as a top 5 unit in the game, and I think that's going a little bit too far. I don't think Tibarn is among the top 5 best units in the game, but I will say this much. On a tier list like this, where we're looking at every single unit in the game, and Tier 1 is very loose in terms of not being limited as far as how many units we're going to have in Tier 1. I think Tibarn definitely deserves to be up there for sure. But the only reason why I didn't like Tibarn on the Japanese tier list is they had him as the top 5 unit in the game, and I could easily just name 5 units that are way more threatening than Tibarn. Now, as far as who I would bump up, definitely Sothis, I think. Sothis is just one of the best infantry bait units in the game. She negates effective against dragons on her weapon, and it comes with built-in distant counter. So that's already very powerful. Also, the adaptive damage is nice. And this Sothis has quite a bit of speed, so she does have some player phase potential. And the main takeaway from this Sothis is that she has Sirius as her special attack. And it just does a bunch of damage, and it recovers HP. So it's a very good perf special, and with a 2-hit cooldown, she's always going to see that come into play. So I think Sothis deserves to be bumped up. Now, Keaton is a little bit iffy for me. I think you could make arguments to drop Keaton down 1. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of these Vantage Brave attacking units, with the exception of Altina, because she brings a whole lot more to the table than just Vantage double attacking. But I mean, you could make arguments that Keaton is up there, so I guess we could have him in there. There's not really the biggest problem with that. But Sothis should be bumped up, and afterwards, I think this is fine. And next up, we come to red bows and red daggers, and we have the Picnic Flora, and we have Igreen over here. I mean, you could make arguments that Igreen maybe gets bumped up. Igreen is very good, and her perf is pretty crazy. It turns her into a stat ball, and it has a whole bunch of good effects on it. But I don't know if I would have her in Tier 1. Like, it's a little bit iffy. It's a toss-up, really. Depends on who you're asking about that, but at the very least, I will give a shout-out to Igreen as a mention for Tier 1, but I think Picnic Flora is fine down here. And let me just quickly see. Okay, so in Tier 3, they have these 6, and yeah, I don't really think any of these deserve to be in Tier 2 or Tier 1, so no complaints from me with that section there. Okay, we're moving on to Lance units now. So we have Duo Ephraim, we got Forsyth, we got Brave Lucina, Duo Pala, and we have Valentine Rudolph. So a pretty good selection there. I have absolutely no complaints with any of those. Okay, now down here we have Tsubasa, actually, and you could probably make some arguments that Tsubasa gets moved up. She has built-in Desperation and double type effectiveness on her weapon, and it's not the hardest condition for you to meet that, so as long as you take some actions with a couple of your other units at the start of the turn before Tsubasa attacks, she gets that Desperation effect. So having Desperation so quickly is very helpful for an offensive unit like her. And of course, with effective against armors, that's just going to really pack on the pain, especially in modes like Arena and stuff like that, where armors are just everywhere. So a consistent Desperation effect where you don't need to be low on HP, I think is very solid, but I mean, no complaints from me for her being in Tier 2. I think these 5 up here definitely stand above the rest for sure. And I don't think there's anyone else in Tier 2 that I think I would want to bump up to Tier 1. So pretty solid Lance tier list there, actually. Okay, next up we've got Tome units. So we have Duo Alphonse, Legendary Azura. We got Legendary Julia, Ophelia, and Peony. And once again, I don't really have any complaints with that. I think that is pretty much the cream of the crop when it comes to blue Tome units. Duo Alphonse, like, this guy is definitely in the argument for top 5 units in the game. He has an amazing duo skill, and he's just an amazing unit all on his own. Now, is there anyone down here that I think I would bump up? Honestly, probably not. Like, maybe Brunya, maybe, but that's a big maybe, and it's mainly just because of how good she is in Aether Raids, being able to ignore her own penalties. That's just a very powerful effect to have in that mode, but like, comparatively, these 5 are just going to be good everywhere, while Brunya, she's going to be good in most of the modes, but she really stands out in Aether Raids, and I think that's why a lot of people build her up. So, just for versatility's sake, I think these 5 do have a little bit of an edge on Brunya. Otherwise, the rest seem fine. R.I.P. Reinhardt down here. I mean, he is a Tier 2 unit. I wouldn't say he's Tier 1 anymore. He's aged a little bit, even though he's still very good. Okay, so next up, we've got Blue Beast and Blue Breath units. Okay, so we have the Fallen Corin M, we have Nyla, we got Nils, we got Legendary Tiki, and we have Adrift Corin M. Alright, there's no way Adrift Corin M should be in Tier 2 by comparison to the Fallen Corin M. I mean, I think it just goes without saying that the Fallen Corin M is better. Now, unfortunately, this guy has the stats of a player phase monster, and then he's not allowed to have Gale Force or a couple of really good things that Dragon types miss out on, like also Repel and Close Call, which would have been fantastic on him. So, the Fallen Corin M is in a little bit of a tight spot where he kind of gets shafted just by being a Breath type, but he's still so solid overall, and his stats are so good and well placed. You could make arguments to bump him into Tier 1, but I think he's actually fine down here. He still has to watch out for effective damage on dragons too, so I think it is fair to have him down here. And let me just quickly take a look at Tier 3 at a glance, see if anyone should be bumped up. Alright, Naesala, you guys already know my stance on Naesala. I feel like he's basically as good as Tibarn for the same reasons. All you really need out of them is 3 range movement on a flying type with Gale Force, and they are going to put in some serious work, especially in, every mode. So, I don't think Tibarn has head and shoulders an advantage on Naesala, but, I mean, I can understand Naesala being lower than Tibarn. He has less attack, and there are a little bit more side effects to Naesala, but just in terms of utility's sake, they are very much similar, so I don't think he should be so far behind. And Pan is also a standout unit in my opinion. I think Pan, maybe, well, alright, I guess not, because Resplendent Eliwood I can understand, but Pan, even though her weapon is super good, her attack is really not that good, so Pan does have one little weakness to consider. I do actually think Pan is more useful than Nyla, though, so, I mean, that is one thing to consider. Naesala, too. I would say Naesala and Pan are a little more useful than Nyla overall. And this is coming from a guy who is a huge Nyla fan. But then again, I guess I am a huge Naesala fan, too. So it sort of equals out there. Yeah, but basically, that's all I can think of. Just maybe Naesala and Pan possibly being bumped up to Tier 2. Otherwise, I don't really have too many problems with that. Okay, next up we come to Blue Bows and Blue Daggers. So, of course, Legendary Chrom at the top there leading the pack. This guy is the most biased unit they ever released. So, first of all, this guy came out with a 180 BST dual skill, which just completely craps on all the other legendary pair-up heroes. It was so unfair that they gave him that. Also, his assist costs 500 SP for whatever reason, so it bumps him into another scoring bracket. If we take a look at Legendary Lucina, who is also on this tier list, Future Vision is a unique assist, and it only costs 400 SP. So, I don't know why they got off on thinking Chrom needed to have a 500 SP assist skill. And then, if that's not even enough, his weapon is effective against armors, and, he does so much. He is just so stupid. So, Chrom is my most hated unit in the entire game, just because of what he does in arena mode. It's, complete chaos when you have to fight this guy. Otherwise, though, I mean, yeah, he is head and shoulders above all the other Blue Bows and Blue Daggers. Okay, so, very interesting. We have Halloween Niles up there, and I completely agree, actually, because any bow unit that has Bold Fighter and Brave Bow is just gonna wreck shop no matter what. He can hit 4 times guaranteed with that, and he's ramping into his special as well, so these armored bow units are kind of slept on a little bit. Even though, well, Valentine Faye is definitely the best of the bunch, but that doesn't make the other two bad, so don't sleep on the bow armored units. They are very good. And, of course, Legendary Lucina with Future Vision. It's just, one of the best assists in the game, if not the best assist in the game. So, yeah, totally have her in here. I don't think she's on the same level as Chrom, though, so she definitely deserves to be Tier 2. And then these 4 over here, I don't think any of them are really all that special, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with this section of the tier list. Okay, so let's move on to the Axe units now, and we have Duo Alm, we got Annette, Legendary Edelgard, we got Legendary Hector, Brave Ike, Mamori, and we got Surtur. Okay, I feel like Surtur has been showing his age recently, and he's not as good as he used to be. Especially not when he came out, where he was just deemed to be so broken when he came out that intelligent systems removed him from the random pool where you could enter a map and he's not going to randomly spawn anymore. So they definitely were aware that Surtur was super insane when he came out. But that's not really so much the case anymore. I feel like there's too many units now that have null follow-up that they can just wreck Surtur. Also, like, everything that gets released has effective against armors now. So that's just another slight to be had against Surtur. But Sinmara is still, like, one of the most busted things in the arena modes. So Sinmara alone is able to carry Surtur, I think. So I would say, yeah, he probably definitely does deserve to still be in Tier 1. Otherwise, I mean, I feel like the rest of the units in here are self-explanatory. Maybe Legendary Hector needs a little bit more explaining. So he does have Ostian Pulse, which is still one of the best support-type effects you can have to support a team. The -1 cooldown count with the Tactic-type effect is very easy to activate. And he has been sort of power-crept by Mamori, who has better defenses, and then her weapon is just a bigger and badder Thunder Armads. So Mamori is a little bit better on defense than Hector. But of course Hector has his own advantages. Being a legendary hero, he can help you score a lot higher in certain modes. And Ostian Pulse is still a very good thing to have. So I think it's fair to have legendary Hector up there. Now in this tier here, do I think anyone should be bumped up? Let me just do a quick glance here. Okay, just off the top of my head, this Spring Fear should probably be bumped up. She is so ridiculous. Like, you guys don't even know how good the Bunny Fear is. With her -1 cooldown, she has effective against armors, she has null follow-up built in, she's a flying unit, of course. The Bunny Fear is super underrated, and I think she deserves to definitely be in Tier 1. One of the best Gale Force units in the game, for sure. Otherwise, though, I think this is fine. I don't really see any standout units in here. So, pretty solid overall, just with one minor change I would make. Okay, next up, let's take a look at Green's homes. So, we've got Legendary Celica, we have Leon, or Fallen Leon, and then we have Thrasir. So, I commented on this in my review of the Japanese tier list, where I said Legendary Celica and Thrasir are just about on par with each other. Now, of course, each one of them have their advantages over the other, but, like, in a bubble, I think Legendary Celica brings a little bit more to the table, with her weapon giving her guaranteed damage based on the foe's res, and then built-in null follow-up and desperation on her B-slot skill is pretty nasty. So, Celica is definitely one of the best units in the game, but Thrasir does have some tricks up her sleeve too, especially in Aether Raids, so I guess, like, as long as the two of them are together and not in separate tiers like we saw on the Japanese tier list, I think it's fine. And of course, Fallen Leon. Actually, you know, I might think that Fallen Leon could be bumped down to Tier 2. That might sound like a hot take to some, because he is so stacked against ranged type of opponents. But he's not, like, going to be super crazy against ranged reds. Like, Fallen Julia, for example, is just going to tear this guy in half. So, even though Fallen Leon is very specialized, I feel like he does have some shortcomings, so maybe he gets bumped down to Tier 2. Also, he's not quite as crazy against melee types if you wanted to run a close counter build. So just another little slight to be had against that Fallen Leon. He is very good though, don't get me wrong on that. And as far as the other units in Tier 2, I don't think anyone really should be moved up. The Kid Merrick is like the only standout. I guess him and Levin, possibly even the Dancing Reinhardt. I think those three stand out, but I don't think they're good enough to be bumped into Tier 1. So pretty solid from GamePress on that. Okay, next up, let's take a look at the Green Breaths and the Green Beasts. So in Tier 1, we have the female Kana, we've got Nagi, we have Raisin, and we have Winter Sothis. Okay, so it looks like Raisin and Tharja so far have been the only free-to-play merge projects that are in Tier 1, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I don't think anyone is going to argue that those are two of the best plus 10 projects you can go for, so definitely shoutouts to Tharja and Raisin holding it down for the free-to-play crew. Now, I don't really have too much experience using female Kana, so I don't know if she's that crazy, to be honest, but her Refine does come with a really nice effect. It has, I believe, lull attack and speed. It's either lull attack and speed or lull attack and res. And then I think she gains some defenses too, so her Refine is pretty solid, and being an infantry bait unit, she does have a bit of an edge there. She does have to watch out, though, because effective against dragons are just going to ruin it for her. So, actually, I need you guys' help in the comment section for this one. What do you think about female Kana, and do you think she is tier 1 material? I can't even comment because I just don't have enough experience using her, but I mean, she seems like she has all the workings to be in tier 1 for sure. And then the other two units, Nagi and Winter Sothis, I don't really have too many complaints on. Nagi is one of the few units with effective against Colorless. Now, unfortunately, she's an armored type, so she can't really abuse it with Null Sea Disrupt, but still, I mean, the -1 cooldown on her weapon allows her to instantly ramp into Soul with Special Fighter. So she does have a couple of tricks up her sleeve, and she is still very good. And Winter Sothis, what is there to say about her? She's basically like the biggest stat ball in the entire game with the highest BST, and then she has a Super Boon, and then she has Sirius, and then you can ramp into Sirius with Special Fighters, so that Winter Sothis is on another level. If you have Duo Idun to support her, then like it's just GG. No effective against armors, no chance at taking her down. I guess you could make the same argument for the female Kana, actually. Like, if you got Duo Idun for the Duo skill support, then yeah, I guess these dragon-type units do come into their own in that scenario. So, that is an argument, I guess. And then, as for Tier 2 for these green units, I don't really think anyone gets to be bumped up. Yeah, I think this is fine. None of them really stand out all that much. Maybe Myrrh actually gets bumped into Tier 2 after she got her refine, but otherwise, this is fine. I don't even think Myrrh should be in Tier 1 even after the refine, but Tier 2 would be fair for her. Okay, so next up we have the green bows and the green daggers, and pretty much only two in Tier 2 with Winter Jafar and also the Halloween Kagero. I think that's fair. I mean, you could make some arguments that Jafar gets bumped into Tier 1, because you could just give him Broadleaf Fan and then support him with Duo Mikaya's Duo skill. And that Winter Jafar is going to be so busted as a Vantage unit. Like, that's the type of Vantage shenanigans that really go underrated. And actually, you know, let me just double back real quick to Inigo, and let me just say that if you have Duo Mikaya's Duo skill, all of these Vantage units that have Brave weapons just become so insane with that Duo skill. So if you want to look at it that way, then I guess you could have Inigo in Tier 1. It's just super awkward for me to see him in the same tier as Altino when I know for a fact Altino's just way better than him. So there is that, but like, don't at me about this. The Duo skill from Duo Mikaya really is insane on these Vantage units, especially the ones with the Brave weapons. So, pretty much outside of just Winter Jafar possibly being in Tier 1, I guess you could make the same arguments for Kagero, but Jafar has a better BST and he's got better speed. So, I think he does have some advantages over her. And these three, I don't really think too much of them, so yeah, maybe Winter Jafar gets bumped up, but I mean, either way, I don't really see it as a problem with this list. Okay, so let's move on to the colorless bows now, and we have Legendary Alm, we got Valentine Faye, we have Legendary Leaf, and we have Duo Marth. So a pretty solid selection there, actually. Pretty much the best colorless bow units in the game right there. In the case of Legendary Alm and Legendary Leaf, I think it goes without saying they are at the top of the top. They are pretty much as good as it gets for colorless bows. I feel like Leaf is just slightly better because he's got more tricks up his sleeve than Alm. Like, Leaf can pull the Vantage combo with his double attack Brave weapon. He can pull Gale Force shenanigans, and he's got 3 range mobility as a horse, so he has a little more utility than Legendary Alm. But of course, Alm has defense reduction on his weapon, and his special attack is pretty nuts. So Alm is probably harder to bait overall, but like, I feel like Legendary Leaf just gives you an overall better package, so I would probably have him maybe just a slight bit above Alm, but they are both definitely still in Tier 1 for sure. Valentine Faye, she is ridiculous, especially after she got the Spendthrift Bow. Like, a plus 10 Valentine Faye with Close Foil and Spendthrift Bow is one of the most nightmarish things you can try to deal with in arena modes, so if you fought that nightmare, you know what I'm talking about. And the Duo Marth, actually, he's very rare. I don't see him all that often, and he can supply bonus doubler to your armor and flying type units with his Duo skill, but I feel like Legendary Eliwood actually does that a little bit more consistently. And then otherwise, Marth is just a fast attacking unit with a lot of speed and a lot of attack, which isn't really the best on an armored unit, because if you're going to want to go offensive, you want your units to have at least infantry type movement. So I guess maybe with Armored Stride, that helps out this duo Marth a bit. But I guess I don't really have too many complaints about him being in Tier 1. I do think the other three are just way better than him, though. And then for the other bow units, yeah, I don't really think any of them need to be in Tier 1. They are very good to be sure, especially Brave Lyn, who has held up all this time. Bernie is very good too, and as is Claude. Eleonora is pretty good too, and Halloween Jacob, like I said, with the Halloween Niles, any of these armored units with access to the Brave Bow and Bold Fighter should not be slept on at all. They just dominate in Abyssal maps and chain challenges. But I do think the Colorless Bow section is pretty solid on this list. Okay, so now we move on to Daggers and Colorless Tomes, and we have Bramimond and Layla leading the pack. Absolutely no complaints from me there. They are next level units for sure. Now, who should actually be bumped up? I think maybe Kranya gets a mention for that. Kranya, with her Vantage shenanigans and being able to run Special Spiral and Vantage, is something that only Ares is capable of doing, but Ares is not a ranged unit, so it's easier for Kranya to actually snipe at the Hardy-bearing units when you run her in Aether Raids. So I feel like you could make the arguments that Kranya gets bumped up, but I don't really have any complaints with her being in Tier 2. So, yeah, as long as Bramimond and Layla are up there, there's no real issues with this. And, of course, Duo Micaiah is going to be in Tier 1 whenever they add her to the list. I don't think there's any debate that her duo skill is just completely groundbreaking for a lot of units. Okay, and let's move on to the Colorless Breaths and Colorless Beasts now. So we got Kainagus, Fallen Female Corrin, we got Leanne, we got Valoria, and we have Fallen Tiki, all of them in Tier 1. Pretty much no complaints from me from that. I guess if you're going to have Fallen Female Corrin in Tier 1, then probably Mila would be in Tier 1 as well once they add her to the list. Because Mila has a whole bunch of tricks up her sleeve in Aether Raids, and then, like, statistically speaking, Mila has so much defense and res. She's a spectacular tank for sure, and the colorless typing means that not a lot of units have type advantage on her. So I feel like you could have her in the same tier as the Fallen Female Corrin. Corrin does have a lot of speed though, so that is one thing to take into account. The speed is very nice for her when she's trying to play her phase. But I feel like the isolation effect and the light blessings would put Mila in the same tier just because of the utility that provides. And as for the other units, I have no complaints. Valoria, she was in my top 10 best 5 stars to have one copy of, so definitely Valoria with her support abilities and the cooldown reduction is very good. Kainagus is still very much the king of the beasts. He's a really good bait unit. And Leanne, of course, if you're going to have Racing in Tier 1, there's no reason not to have Leanne in there as well. The Herons are just so good as dancing units. And Duma and the New Year Selkie, I don't think they should be bumped into Tier 1. They do have some downsides to them, so pretty solid overall. And the final category we're going to be taking a look at on this list is the colorless staff units. So we have Bride Fiorm and we have the Brave Veronica. I feel like Brave Camilla could probably be bumped up as well. Like, what she offers as a staff unit is just so ridiculous. Being a flying unit and then having built-in gravity, like, she is so offensive. She's definitely one of the best to run in Aether Raids for setting up a restore trap. But I can totally see the arguments why people would have Veronica in Tier 1 over her. The 3-range movement is just what makes Veronica so good. But I do think Brave Camilla is at least in the same tier, at least as good as Bride Fiorm. Like, there's no reason Bride Fiorm should be above Camilla, I don't think. And as for the other units in here, I don't really think any of them stand out all that much. The Winter Erica gets a mention, because you can run Bold Fighter and Miracle on her. And that's actually one of the easiest ways to ramp into Miracle. You could also run the Dazzling Staff Refine on her to make her really annoying to get rid of, but I don't think she has all that much utility in comparison to the trio of Camilla, Veronica, and Fiorm. So there is that to consider. And that pretty much covers us for the Tier 1 and lightly coverage of Tier 2 for the GamePress tier list. Overall, I'm a lot happier with it than I thought I would be. Like, I remember the last time I looked at this tier list, I was kind of baffled at some of the choices, but looking at it now, I don't really think there's too much to complain about. It does seem very solid overall, and for the most part, I don't have any complaints with a lot of the choices, so they did a very good job here, and of course, they get my utmost respect for just having a tier list that encompasses all the units in the game. That is such a huge project to go for. So that's going to wrap us up for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed my little breakdown of the GamePress tier list, which is, I guess it's fair to say this is like the most well-known tier list in the English-speaking community. So those are just my thoughts on it. So definitely let me know in the comment section, guys, how you feel about this tier list, and if you think any of the placements are wrong or anyone should be bumped up or bumped down. And we will just go from there. So that's it for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And as always, this is your boy Tacho signing out. So take care. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll catch you all again in the next one.